Hey, get up.
You feel someone shaking your shoulder gently, and you mutter a groggy response before you roll over onto your back, exhaling a series of tired, sleepy sounds. Your legs are halfway off the end of the bed, and you pull yourself into a seated position, rubbing your face with both hands as you find yourself looking up at Ladson.
Did you fall asleep like this? Guess.
You reply, as your mouth stretches open into a huge yawn. You wipe at your face again with your sleeve, trying to figure out what he wants.
What's going on? Why'd you wake me?
In the dim light, you can just see a tall figure shuffle into the doorway, and you already know who it is.
Oh, fuck.
You collapse backwards onto the bed, covering your face with both hands. You don't know how you look, but it's probably terrible.
I'm up. You know, it can wait until No, I'm up.
You say quickly, jumping to your feet. You brush your hair out of your face and hold it behind you with one hand in a makeshift ponytail, hoping that it doesn't look too unmanageable. He wasn't going to train you today if you looked like you were really out of it.
Up and ready to go. See? I'm already dressed. No, you're not.
Poe replies, and you literally have to take a second to look down and make sure that you are not, in fact, standing in front of him stark naked. But your hands are by your sides, and you feel the brush of fabric underneath your fingertips.
I'm pretty sure I am.
Suddenly he throws something at you from out of the darkness, and you can feel heavy fabric hitting your face as you yank it off of you.
Seriously? What is this? Flight suit.
He replies simply.
If you're going to be a pilot, you at least gotta need the right gear. Awesome.
You breathe out of your nose. You look towards Ladson, who doesn't look at all confused.
It sounds like I'm going to be busy today. Can you keep an eye on Annie? 2 of them.
He responds, and he makes his way past Poe into the other room.
You know my saying, have fun, don't die.
Poe just stands in the doorway, observing you for a moment longer, and you shift your weight to one side as you cross your arms over your chest.
What? Wasting daylight.
He responds, simply before he turns to wait in the living room. You huff out a breath and strip only to your undergarments, pulling the orange jumpsuit on. It's a little long in the sleeves, but otherwise it fits you almost perfectly. You feel like you should be concerned with how he was able to guess your exact size, but you're too tired to really let that concern you at the moment. You slip back into your boots, figuring that they would probably be tough enough for anything you had to do today. You secure your hair back behind you and head back into the living room.
This is ridiculously orange.
You tell him, pinching at a bit of fabric beneath 2 fingers.
Do I at least get one of those white things? The vest? It's supplementary gear for fighter pilots. It carries radiation shielding, emergency fire suppression, backup life support.
He adjusts on his shoulders.
And it makes me look pretty cool too, wouldn't you say? Okay.
You say testily.
I take it I won't need one then. Well, let's try it on,
Poe says. He ignores your protests, and you wait for a moment as he undoes several harnesses and slips it over your arms, holding it in place over your shoulders. You wonder why for a moment as he relaxes his grip, and suddenly you feel the full weight of the jacket against your back.
Holy shit.
You huff, and Poe just lets out a laugh as he slips it back off of you and starts to put it back on himself.
How heavy is that?
He shrugs.
10 kilos?
You huff. It felt like it was a lot heavier on your back, but you still couldn't believe he was just walking around with a 10-kilo vest on. Maybe you got used to it after a while, but you didn't exactly want to find out. Suddenly you see a little face poking through the open doorway behind Poe, and you bend down to his level.
Hey, Annie, get back to bed, okay? Where are you going?
He asks.
Are you going back to class? Back to...
You shake your head back and forth. You had asked Sadie to pass a note along to your academia as to why you had decided to suddenly stop teaching. You figured something along the lines of, summoned by the resistance and imminent risk had a nice ring to it.
No, I'm training how to be a pilot so we can fly a spaceship and travel all over the galaxy.
He rubs his face sleepily with one hand.
Can I come? No.
You whisper a little too quickly. Then add,
Not this time. Maybe another time. Okay, Annie?
He's too tired to argue, and you see Ladson scoop him up from behind you.
See you later.
He he says, and you give a curt nod in his direction as you signal to Poe and head towards the door.
Cute kid.
Poe says once you're in the corridor.
He can be.
You shrug.
You know, when he wants to be. Hopefully being here will decrease the frequency of his tantrums a bit. I'm sure he'll come around.
Poe says, but you just shrug your shoulders noncommittally. You didn't know how many kids he had been around in the Resistance, but you were pretty sure that none of them were anything like Kylo Ren's kid.
So what are we flying? Leia said you were starting me out on a transport shuttle? For starters,
Poe replies simply.
You'll see.
You pout as you walk along beside him. It's early in the morning and you hardly pass anyone as you make your way out to the hangar.
I should warn you, I'm not a patient person, especially not this early in the morning. I've noticed,
Poe says with good humor in his voice, and you just snort under your breath as you follow him to a transport shuttle that was already set out. Luckily, you've been in a similar transport shuttle before, and you follow him up the narrow walkway past 4 small seats and slip into the co-pilot's chair.
Am I expected to do something?
You ask, looking at the console in front of you. There are knobs and dials and buttons, and you don't know which is going to make the ship suddenly lurch forward or which is going to make the shuttle drop out of the sky and send you both to your very untimely deaths.
You see that switch over there?
He asks, pointing to a small blue lever with a white stripe on the left side of your console, marked Main Repulsor Power.
Yes?
You say nervously as your eyes sweep over the lever.
I see it. Flicking that switch turns on the repulsors under the shuttle and connects over to the main ignition chambers.
He trails off as you give him a blank look, and he sucks in a deep breath.
How much did Latson teach you? Nothing.
You admit sheepishly.
He took care of everything. I just sort of sat back and watched. And that's fine.
Poe says, his voice full of confidence.
Then we'll start at square one.
He pulls a sheet of flimsoplast out from under his seat. First lesson in flight. On a winged craft like this shuttle, there are 4 forces that govern flight in an atmosphere. Lift, gravity, thrust, and drag. And the significance of each of those forces varies from planet to planet. As he's talking, he draws a crude silhouette of the shuttle with 4 arrows around it in a cross shape, with up labeled lift, down labeled gravity, backwards labeled drag, and forward labeled thrust, as he explains. Lift pushes the shuttle up when it's moving, while gravity pulls it down. Drag pulls it backwards when the shuttle is moving, and the thrust of the engines pushes the shuttle forward. On a medium-sized verdant planet like this one, with a moderately dense atmosphere of simple diatomic gases, drag is a significant factor to consider at high speeds, and since the car's gravity isn't 0, we need the repulsors to cancel out the weight of the shuttle so we can get off the ground, so we can start the main engines and get lift from the wings and lateral stabilizers. Additional principles come into play for spaceflight, but those can wait for another day. For now, let's just go through the main takeoff sequence. That switch I pointed out, flip it. You flip it upward, and as you do, Poe turns a large red and white striped knob at his console, and the wall panel to your right comes alive with white and red lights. Some blinking, some solid, and all of them marked with small labels you have to lean in close to read. After a short delay, you feel the shuttle slowly rise to a steady hover.
What was that knob you turned?
You ask. That's the master breaker, Poe explains. It connects the shuttle's reactor to the main power bus so we can get started. As for the panel on your right that just lit up, I need you to find the 4 solid red-lit buttons in the middle, arranged in a line. You see them? You turn to the side and eventually find them, nodding your head in affirmation. Good! There's a readout below them that counts down as the flight computer does its system checks. Once it starts flashing 1, press the second button from the left. You would prefer not to do anything your first day out, but you could follow simple directions easily enough. You watch as the readout counts down, pressing the second button once it stops on 1 and it starts flashing. Every light on the panel changes to solid white and the readout now reads 0.
What did I just do?
You ask nervously. No, that's good, Poe assures you. That means there are no faults detected and we can proceed with startup. Press the third button. That'll switch the reactor to high power so we can start the main engines. You do so, and a ring of 6 lights at the top of the wall panel switches to a solid yellow color for close to a minute, and you can hear the low hum beneath you become more of a whine as the reactor powers up. Eventually, it settles at a higher frequency and is suddenly cut short as the yellow lines flash and become green. You can't hide the look of concern on your face, but it only makes Poe chuckle. Don't worry, that's a noise-canceling feature Cinar added when pilots and their distinguished passengers complained they couldn't hear themselves think over the whine of the reactor. Now, one last thing to take care of before we can leave. He holds the button on the comlink between the two consoles and speaks, "Launch control, this is Black Leader, requesting launch departure for approach Bravo on automatic taxi." It sounds so ridiculously over the top and official that you can't help but grin.
That's a negative, Black Leader.
A voice responds, and your smile falters. Negative? Did Leia decide against your flight lessons after all?
Approach Bravo is still undergoing maintenance on the blast doors. You're cleared for taxi to approach Charlie. Have a good flight, Commander.
You have literally no idea what that was all about. But you were going to guess by the words, "have a good flight," that this was going to happen after all. Out the window, you can see a black stripe on the floor leading from your ship to the rightmost hangar door start flashing a sequence of lights that make it look like a white dot was racing away from you and out the hangar door. Poe sees you watching it and is quick to launch into another explanation. That flashing light warns the hangar crew that the ship is moving on autopilot and to stay clear. Press the 4th button. That disengages the inertial lock and activates the flight consoles. Once your console lights come on, flip up that green toggle on the left, the one that's marked automatic control. That turns repulsor control over to the computer, and it'll follow the guideline out of the hangar door and unfold the wings once we're out there. You follow his instructions and feel a small lurch as the ship begins following the stripe out the hangar door, where it comes to a stop in a small clearing. A screen on your console showing a front profile of the shuttle outlined in yellow show the wings folding down, turning green once the shuttle resembled an upside-down Y. Poe flips the taxi toggle back down as the controller's voice crackles through the speakers.
Black Leader, you are cleared for departure.
Poe pulls outward on a small control stick to the right of his seat. "This is the main flight stick," he explains. "When you pull it outward, it temporarily increases power to the main repulsors, so we can clear the tree line before we engage the main engines." As he does so, the shuttle begins to rise up into the air on repulsor power. Once you're above the tree line, he points out the stick to his left. This one is the drive control. He pushes it forward as he talks, powering up the engines and sending you racing into the sky. Gaze out of the window in front of you, watching the greenery of the planet slip by underneath the ship.
How fast are we going?
You ask, turning to him excitedly. Right now, we're going about 300 kilometers an hour. But the shuttle's capable of much faster. Poe looks at you and grins back, pleased to see his own excitement reflected in your expression. "Well, you look like you're having fun."
Maybe.
You reply, although you can't contain the eagerness in your voice.
Are we going into space?
"Not today," Poe explains. "First, you need to learn how to fly. And besides, as far as space goes, this particular shuttle model was only designed for short trips between capital ships in deep space or high-speed trips between planet surface and a ship in low orbit. It was never designed for extended stellar exposure, so it only has minimum radiation shielding and life support. And besides that, Dakar is that planetary ring out there, and the shuttle isn't currently equipped with a shield generator to deflect the cloud of microscopic debris in orbit out there." You bite your lip and nod, overwhelmed by how complicated the whole thing seemed. You knew that flying a ship wasn't going to be easy, but there was just so much you had to know, not just about piloting a ship, but space in general.
I don't really know if I can fly in space.
You admit, settling back in your chair. "Well, it's not as easy as it looks," Poe tells you, sending a wink in your direction. You stick your tongue out him, but you can't tell if it was actually difficult and he just made it look easy, or if he was just messing with you. Maybe you should have asked if Ladson could come too. He'd learned to fly one of the ships on board the Starkiller base, but you were smart enough to know that each ship handled differently. Probably.
Is that hard?
You ask, pointing at the dual joysticks in his hands. He looks down at his hands before looking back at you. You want to try?
No.
You say, feeling all of the humor and excitement leave your face.
No, not yet. No, I'm not eager to kill you just yet. Sorry.
Yeah, it'll be fine, he says, jerking his head toward the left one. This one controls thruster power. Tilt it forward to go faster, backwards to slow down. We're in atmosphere, so you're not going to be able to drift.
Drift?
You ask. Side to side, he replies. The right one is just attitude control. Pretty basic stuff. Back to tip the nose up, forward to tip the nose down.
Tip the nose down? You mean like to go down?
See? You're getting the hang of it already. Just keep both of your hands steady and you should be fine. You put your left hand on the first lever, curling your knuckles over it, and then hold your right arm by your side, curling your fingers around the vertical toggle. It's spring-loaded, he tells you, so you don't need to really move it much. It'll automatically snap back to center.
Okay. Let me know when you're ready for me to take over.
Already did it, he says, and you turn to him sharply to see him take both hands off the levers. You don't even realize, if you turn to look at him, that you're pulling slightly toward the left, tilting the shuttle slightly in that direction. You quickly realize your mistake and jolt it back over to the right, trying to even it out, but the shuttle tips wildly to the other side and you bump harshly in your seat before the shuttle rights itself, while an alarm sounds and the automatic control toggle on the console flashes red before it turns back to steady green.
I'm an idiot,
you tell him, staring firmly ahead of you, determined not to look at him anymore.
I'm going to kill us both.
Yeah, you're doing fine, he tells you. And you can see him watching you out of the corner of your eye, out as he puts both hands behind his head.
I'm so glad you're enjoying your last few minutes alive.
You continue sarcastically.
I should have just gone back to being an interpreter.
Nah, you're too hard on yourself, Poe tells you. You just need to have more confidence.
I do have confidence in myself. When my feet are on the ground and my staff is in my hand.
Yeah. Gotta get out of your comfort zone sometime.
I did get out of my comfort zone. And I wound up on Starkiller Base. Look at how that turned out for me.
Poe's silent for a moment, and you immediately regret saying it. If you were really going to be training intensively with Poe, Finn, and Rey every day, you didn't want them all feeling guilty, mentally dwelling over the fact that you were only here because Kylo Ren tortured you. You didn't want to tell them the truth, especially when you weren't sure what the truth was, but you didn't want them to be training you out of a fallacious sense of pity.
Look, I wasn't lying about what I said earlier. Kylo Ren really did teach Ladson how to pilot a ship, and he really did let us go.
You don't give him time to answer as you keep talking.
I don't really want to talk about it, but you should know being there wasn't entirely terrible. Captain Phasma gave me self-defense lessons after Kylo Ren almost choked me to death, and then gave me that staff to help me better defend myself. I wouldn't have been able to knock you unconscious if it wasn't for her.
You shoot a tight-lipped smile in his direction, but quickly focus your eyes back front and center, before you can really see his expression.
Or Kylo. He taught me how to fight, how to use the Force, and being with him wasn't entirely intolerable. He saved Sadie, and I didn't really have to do anything to get him to do it, other than what I was already doing.
Poe's silent for so long you immediately regret telling him any of this. Leia had hinted that you should probably at least try talking to them, but you barely knew him. This was too much, too soon. There was no reason for you to be spilling your confessions to him this early in the morning on your first day of training. Were you really so eager to get some insight on your feelings towards Kylo Ren that you would spill all your secrets to the first person who happened to be trapped in a planet's atmosphere with you? Yeah, sounds like a good guy. The sarcasm in his voice is palpable, and you almost want to let go of the controls and just let fate take its course.
That was years ago. I haven't seen him in years. I haven't seen him since you blew up the Starkiller base, or probably sometime before that.
You bite your lip and then add,
I didn't know about all the awful stuff that he did before, but I do now. I know how he killed his own father, and he's
You shake your head.
He's not the same person anymore, if he ever was, and I know I should just be thankful I'm alive.
It's silent for a few moments longer.
He probably only let me go because of Annie. He sensed it before I did, and that's why he sent me away. He told me he would come back and train him. I just didn't know when.
Annie's safe now, Poe says, a hint of firmness in his voice.
Yeah.
You say, looking over at him.
Thanks for picking us up.
Just following orders, he says simply. So, does this mean you've decided that the Resistance isn't a terrible bunch after all?
You have your moments,
You say, turning back toward the open landscape in front of you. Spurred on by sudden confidence, you tilt the shuttle down ever so slightly before leveling off, and then bring it back up again.
This is so easy.
Told you so, Poe replies. And you're glad to hear the humor back in his voice. You make a silent note to yourself that you should probably never talk about Kylo Ren with him ever again. You fly around quietly for about an hour, getting comfortable with the basic maneuvers of the shuttle until Poe takes back the controls from you and steers you back towards the base. You try to think of topics of pleasant conversation, but you can't think of anything to ask him about besides his military experience, and so you just keep quiet, hoping he would volunteer that information like you had. But when he doesn't, you realize you're going to have to suck it up and hope that he didn't remember what you said about Kylo Ren. You knew he would, and you regretted opening your mouth in the first place, but it wasn't something you could take back now. As you approach the base, Control welcomes you back over the comlink and instructs you to enter through Approach Alpha. Once you have reached the clearing outside the hangar, Poe cuts power to the engines, pushes the flight stick inward to hover down to the level of the hangar door, and re-engages automatic control. The wings fold back to the up position, and the shuttle follows the black stripe with the flashing light back to its original spot, turning completely around before backing into its docking space. He presses the first button in line on the panel to his left, starting what looked like the automatic shutdown sequence. All the lights on the panel to your right turn yellow and start to turn red in some predetermined order as the noise dampening deactivates and you can hear the reactor wind down. Eventually, all of the lights turn red, and you can hear the reactor is finally wound down to its steady low hum. Poe flips down the blue repulsor toggle on his console, the action mirrored on your own, causing the shuttle to settle back to the ground. Finally, he opens the boarding ramp and turns the master breaker knob to its original position, and motions toward the ramp to let you disembark first.
So, thanks for that,
you say, exhaling a deep breath as he walks you back toward your quarters. Don't sweat it, he replies. You're both silent for a moment, but it's an uncomfortable silence, and so you're grateful when he finally breaks it. Look, about what you said earlier.
Forget I brought it up,
you say quickly, rubbing your upper arm uncomfortably as you walk. You said you didn't want to talk about it, Poe says quietly. Your head snaps around to the side as you turn to look at him sharply.
What?
You said you didn't want to talk about it, Poe responds. You don't owe us, any of us, any explanation for what happened up there.
Oh.
You say, biting your lip. You hadn't really remembered saying that you didn't want to talk about it. If you had said it, it might have just been something that had slipped out.
No, I mean, it's in the past. I just didn't think it was right for everyone to think I was, like, being brutally tortured or being starved to death in a cell or something.
You pause, considering.
Okay, actually, I mean, that did happen, but it was only for, like, a week or so, and that was more Hux's doing anyway.
My point, Poe says curtly. You're here now, and you're safe. My advice that you didn't ask for, don't dwell on the past any more than you have to.
I'll be sure to remember that.
You tell him as you step outside your door.
So...
You stop talking as a little round droid rolls up to the pair of you, emitting a short little beep. He says hello, Poe translates as he turns to face you.
Hey there,
you reply, stooping down to the droid's level.
So, no hard feelings about what happened before? I'm sorry about threatening to sell you for parts.
BB-8 lets out a few short beeps and whistles, and you look up at Poe. He says you're forgiven. You smile back down at the little droid before standing back up again.
So where do I need to meet Finn?
You ask. He gives you a room number and a little wave as he heads off with BB-8. You have no idea where that room is exactly, but you're sure it's probably not that hard to find. You couldn't have Poe escorting you everywhere on this base. You head back inside and check both rooms, but Ladson and Annie are nowhere to be found. Not that you were really worried. You know Ladson wouldn't leave Annie alone. Someone probably came by to give them a tour of the base, or they went to get food or something. You head back into your room and put on a plain black pair of pants with a tan long-sleeved shirt, pulling your staff over your head, just in case you would need it. You felt better having it by your side anyways. With nothing better to do, you head back out again to try to find the room number Poe had given you. You had no idea where you were going, and you didn't feel comfortable asking anyone for directions, so you just walked around and around, making random rights and lefts until you finally found it. You had no idea if you were early or late, so you just entered the room, lucky to find Finn already waiting for you. "About time," he says, standing up from his spot on the floor. It's a small training room, no bigger than your bedroom. There are black cushioned mats on the floor, but the most bizarre thing of all was that the walls appeared to be made up entirely of mirrors. As you enter, you can see your confused face reflected back at you, bouncing off each wall. You move your hands to the side, and out of the corner of your eye, you can see your reflection doing the same. It's a bit disorienting, and so you try to stand as still as you can to block it out, focusing on Finn in front of you.
"Sorry,"
you say quickly.
Poe...
"Don't even worry about it," he says, cracking a grin. "I figured Poe was probably already keeping you."
"So,"
you say with a sigh, looking around the room.
"what do you want to do? I know I was told combat training, but..."
"That's up to you. I know you have your staff, but we can save that for another day. Personally, I think Ray should be training you in that. She's much better with one than I am." You just shrug. You want to make some comment about how stormtroopers don't carry staffs, but that wasn't all he was. And you had no idea how long it had been since he had left the First Order. He could have learned to wield one since then. "So show me what you got," he says, signaling for you to come towards him. You take a moment to assess him. He was just about as tall as you were, but if his build was any indication, he probably weighed at least twice what you did. A wall of solid muscle. Not that this bothered you in any way. It would be no different than sparring with Captain Phasma. When you sparred with Kylo, you were both agile and lithe. You both always moved in a series of quick movements, your feet continuously in motion, constantly blocking or dodging. Nimble, short, successive bursts of movement. But when you had sparred with Phasma, she was much bigger than you, much taller than you, and so you had to compensate with speed what you lacked in raw physical strength. It had scared you at first when she came towards you, like a solid wall of power, but both Kylo and Phasma had quickly shown you that you can use your opponent's size against them, so long as you stayed away. Strong people weren't necessarily very fast, and so if you could dance around them, wind them down, getting in blow by blow, you could overpower them easily, but you had to make sure that you could stay out of their grasp. They were strong enough that they could probably have you on the ground in just one or two successive strikes. Judging by Finn's stature, he could probably have you on the ground with only one punch, but he didn't look to be as fast as you were, and you were very fast. You close your eyes and center yourself, letting muscle memory take over. You take a quick jump towards him as you open your eyes and make a move like you're about to kick him with your right foot, standing on the toes of your left foot for balance. But before you complete the kick, which he is quickly prepared to block, you throw up your left foot, kicking him in the abdomen and pushing him back as hard as you can. You land roughly on your feet and take a few shaky steps back as you watch him stumble backwards a few steps into the mirror, which just seems to swallow the force of impact. There's not so much a crack or even a scratch on its surface as he stands up.
"What is that made out of?"
you ask, walking over to an adjacent wall to run your fingertips along the mirror. It was as smooth and as cool as glass, but had an almost rubbery texture to it. "What was that?" Finn asks loudly, and you spin around to face him. "Who taught you to kick like that?"
"I did,"
you say with a shrug of your shoulders. "No, really. I was told you knew how to use a staff, but no one told me you knew how to fight."
"Seriously? Did Poe literally run around telling everyone on base that I knocked him out with his thing?"
You roll your eyes. After how things went down with Poe, you didn't want to tell him anything about what had happened on the Starkiller base, but it was starting to look like you didn't really have a choice here.
Kylo Ren trained me.
What?
And Captain Phasma. They both trained me how to fight and use a staff.
His jaw drops dramatically, and it's all you can do not to laugh.
Do you remember her?
Oh, I remember her, Finn says, but you can't tell if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Man. He runs a hand over his short cropped hair. Are you serious?
Yes?
You ask. He turns around, shaking his head, and you're not quite sure what to say.
Should we try this again?
You know what? Sure. Finn turns back to you and engages you first this time, coming towards you. You're definitely a lot more agile than he is, and as he makes a move to strike you, you spin around, not quite tossing him over your shoulder, but using the force of the weight he put into his punch to push him to the ground regardless. You say softly, not sure what else to say. You knew that you had trained with Kylo Ren, the best of the best, but did that mean you were stronger than an ex-stormtrooper? You had no official training, not really, but you had spent almost every day of the past few years sparring and teaching self-defense classes, so that probably counted for at least something.
Try again?
Okay. Finn jumps to his feet, shaking his head. Okay. I'm really gonna try this time.
You were holding back?
You ask, raising your eyebrows. I think I'm the wrong person for this, he says, holding up his fists in front of him, prepared to go again. I don't want to really hurt you.
I'm pretty sure there's literally no chance of that happening.
You tell him.
Give me your all.
Finn doesn't respond. Instead, he grunts as he swings his fists at you, and you let out a sharp exhale as you decide to block it instead of dodging, grabbing the wrist of his extended arm with both hands. He was definitely a lot stronger than you were. You spin out to try to kick him in the side, but he catches your leg with his other arm. Keeping his other arm still extended and away from your face, you use your free hand to land a punch against his massive shoulder and immediately grimace as a jolt of pain spreads up your wrist.
You are really strong,
you tell him as he releases you. This isn't working, Finn sighs, rubbing his face with one hand.
Our fighting styles are kind of different,
you admit.
Maybe we're not the best people to spar each other. Any way we can do something else?
Yeah, Finn says quickly, seemingly almost relieved by the suggestion. Have you ever used a blaster before?
Nope.
You say simply, shaking your head from side to side. Well, there we go then, Finn says as he spreads his hands by his side. I don't know why they would want me to teach you hand-to-hand combat when they knew you had training.
I don't think anyone did know.
You admit.
I mean, I was teaching self-defense classes at my old academia, but I don't know if anyone knew about that.
Finn just shrugs as he drops back to a seated position on the ground, and you drop to the floor beside him, pulling your knees to your chest.
So, do you want to just hang out?
You ask him. Yeah, that sounds good, he replies. So, Ren really taught you how to fight? I mean, I could see Phasma, but damn. That dude is wicked with his lightsaber.
You fought him?
You ask eagerly. You knew Leia had mentioned it, but you would wanted details, a first-hand account. You had always imagined what Kylo would be like in battle, but you never got the luxury of seeing it firsthand. Even still, you had daydreamed about his fighting style so much, pictured the raw sense of power that just emanated from him as he used his lightsaber and the Force intermittently, that you were practically voracious to eat up any scraps that Finn would throw your way. Yeah, that's how I got this. Finn reaches up behind his head and pulls up the back of his shirt, revealing a long, jagged scar down his back. You can't help but reach out, running your fingertips along the burned pink flesh that cut like lightning through his dark skin. Ordinarily, you wouldn't have been so keen to touch anyone, especially not their scars, but this was a mark made by Kylo's lightsaber, and touching it was the closest you had come to actually touching him in years. Your fingertips were pulsing with sensation as you jerked your hand away, and Finn pulled his shirt down, covering up the scar again.
How did he handle it?
You asked him eagerly.
His lightsaber, I mean, did he
You hold your hands out in front of you, squeezing your hands into fists. You were practically itching to just grab him and see into his mind, see it firsthand, and for a moment you could understand why Kylo wasted no time in using his mind probe to get what he wanted. Why have all of this power when you couldn't use it? You okay? Finn asks, but you completely ignore the look of concern that is spread blatantly across his face.
It's made from a cracked kyber crystal.
You tell him excitedly.
He made it himself. It's fascinating, really. I mean, okay, kind of scary, yes, especially if you're facing it. I can only imagine. But it's fascinating. Like, it's a lot heavier than it looks. It's like swinging an actual sword, although it fights you when you try to swing it. At least it fought me anyway.
You held it? Finn asks, and you're so caught up in the memory that you barely even register the trepidation in his voice.
Yeah, just the once, but that was enough for me. Once when I used the force to push him back when he was choking my friend, which was not his fault, by the way. It was an accident. He wanted to see how much of the force I could use, and so he gave me his lightsaber. It had a force toggle on it, so he wanted to see if I could activate it. And so I got into his head, since it's his weapon, and I channeled him, and it worked. It turned on. Kylo was he didn't show it, but Kylo was very impressed.
Kylo, are you in love with this guy or something?
No.
You say quickly, feeling a blush rise to your cheeks.
No, I mean it was just an interesting experience holding his lightsaber, and I've never really gotten to talk about it with anyone else, so it just sort of slipped out.
He's silent for a moment as he narrows his eyes and studies you intently. You had a thing for this guy? You squint your eyes shut. First Leia, then Poe, then Finn. You were just opening up to everyone today. Maybe next you should let Rey see into your mind so you could show her everything firsthand, and then you wouldn't have to hide anything from anyone anymore. You're trying to think of something to say when Finn puts one of his large hands on yours. I can't imagine what you went through up there. He tells you, and if you're not wrong, there's a bit of sincerity in his voice, as if he really means it. You ever need to talk, I'm here.
Thanks. I know he tried to kill you, and I'm sorry about that. I guess I should seem more sympathetic, but I don't know. He was always nice to me. I can't imagine him doing something like that.
You look down and away, embarrassed by your unwavering loyalty to Kylo. Leia was right. It was undeserved, but you were still going to need time to process everything. Finn just shakes his head, like he's not confused at all. A guy like that, he only shows you what you want to see. Rey told me you're really attuned to the Force. He probably knew what he wanted to get out of you, and he probably figured out the best way to get it. You shrug your shoulders uncomfortably. He's right. You know, he's probably right. And yet you can't help but let a small voice in the back of your head insist that it was real, that Kylo really did love you, that he had done everything he had to protect you and keep you safe because he cared about you. You shrug uncomfortably, but Finn just waits patiently for you to get your thoughts together. His hand over yours, a rock of unrelenting support.
I didn't know why I was on base there, what the Resistance was planning. B manipulated me, and I just thought that, I don't know, Kylo said he wasn't manipulating me, that he wasn't using me, and he did all these things to try to prove it, so I just...
You shrug again.
I don't know. I guess I was just stupid. I believed him.
You're not stupid, Finn says softly. I know how it is. I was there. I was raised in the First Order. I was taken from my family and forced to serve them. I know all about their brainwashing, their manipulation, their mind games. Trust me, when I say it's so subtle you wouldn't even realize it was happening until it was already too late. They get inside your head, make you think things that aren't real, make you... He shakes his head. I don't have a doubt that they could make you see and feel things that weren't real, but that doesn't mean they weren't real to you. You bite your lip and nod your head slowly, taking it all in. You knew that Kylo Ren had the power to probe your mind, but did he also have the power to sway your emotions? To make you feel something for him? You had been able to feel his anger through the Force bond, absorb his rage, but had he actually been calculating enough to make you feel like you had been falling in love with him? Part of you refused to believe it. Part of you staunchly insisted that Kylo had loved you like he had never loved before, cared for you above all others, and believed firmly that he would never ever hurt you or manipulate you in any way. Another part of you thought that notion was very, very stupid.
I waited years for him to come back. Waited all that time for him to come back and train Annie. I never really thought about the danger that posed to Annie or what kind of life he would have from within the ranks of the First Order. I don't know. I never even thought about it. Like, it never even occurred to me.
Brainwashing, Finn repeats. I had dinner with him and Ladson last night. He's a good kid, a smart kid, and I know deep down you would never send him off with Ren.
I hope you're right.
You tell him with a small laugh.
I mean, I guess it doesn't matter now, but I really might have. I know he had killed people, but he'd never told me anything about his past. I didn't find out until yesterday about the Jedi Temple, about how he killed his own father.
You stop as a sudden thought occurs to you.
Can I see it?
You ask quietly. He pulls away from you ever so slightly and you shake your head.
Sorry, I don't know. Without really seeing it myself, I just don't know if I'll ever really believe it.
Ray can show you, Finn tells you. She was there too. He gets to his feet as he leans down and offers his hand to you. You place your hand in his and he jerks you to your feet so quickly he almost pulls you off the ground. He was strong, and you decided it was probably better you weren't going to spar against him anymore. One of you was probably going to get yourself hurt, and you were no longer 100% certain that it wasn't going to be you.
Right now?
You ask as he leads you out of the room. No better time than the present, he says cheerfully, as he leads you down the corridor to see Ray. All of your senses told you to run, but you were divided as to whether you should run away from the truth or towards it.